the West has actually collapsed.
You should no longer live in the Western world.
With the cost of living crisis coming up, younger people are looking abroad for a better, more cost-effective lifestyle.
There are many videos out there of people saying how the West has fallen, or how you need to escape the West, and they will oftentimes use these dramatic videos of Americans doing crazy things in public, or clips and videos of things going wrong in America to try and back up their point. But if we put aside the dramatic, cherry-picked videos of screaming feminists, are these videos actually sharing the truth, or are they just making a problem out of nothing? You may be also asking yourself, why is this kid giving his opinion on something he's too young to understand? And if you are actually thinking that, then fair enough. So before I say another word about this topic, let me give you a very short backstory about me. Last year, I moved from the UK to Thailand alone, and ever since I've been living in the capital city, Bangkok. And before I moved, I had spent my entire life living in the UK. And in that time, I also travelled to many different Western countries. I have also researched both places deeply to figure out where I actually want to live. So I feel like I can give my thoughts on this topic, as I have lived in both a Western country and an Asian country myself. Up until about 20 years ago, China's economy was around 10 times smaller than the economy of the United States. And most Asian countries, apart from Japan, were extremely undeveloped and lacking in pretty much all metrics, especially development of their cities. As you can see, back in the 90s, most major Asian cities looked like barren wastelands with barely any development. And if we compare this to a lot of the major Western cities in the 90s, there is a clear and huge difference. Like, for example, London and New York don't look too dissimilar to how they look today. So 20 to 30 years ago, if you wanted a top standard of living, there was one really clear answer of where you should go: the West. Of course, there were other countries outside of the West which had a good standard of living, for example Singapore, Hong Kong and Tokyo, but there really wasn't much outside of these places, whereas in a lot of Western countries at the time, you had London, Paris, New York and so many other American cities. Basically, most Western places that look great today also looked great back then, because there aren't that many places in the West which just suddenly exploded in growth in the last 20-30 years. Most of these places were already nice back in the day as well. However, in the last 20 to 30 years, most Asian cities have seen incredible economic growth. Cities that once looked basic and relatively dull now look arguably better than most Western cities. And this applies all over Asia. For example, Manila in the Philippines or Bangkok in Thailand have both had incredible transformations over the last 20 to 30 years, as well as many cities in China. Don't get me wrong, of course Western cities have also seen a lot of growth over the last 20 to 30 years, but it's just nowhere near as much as the growth which can be seen in a lot of Asian cities. So nowadays, Western countries aren't the only good places to live. Trust me, I would know, I live in Bangkok. Bangkok feels more developed than most European cities, and there is also a very high standard of living here as well. When it comes to the society and the culture itself, it feels like Asian society is a lot more healthy. And what I mean by this is, in America, the UK, France, and in a lot of other European and Western countries, people just don't seem to be that happy with what they've got. People are often complaining about the government, the systems in place, social injustices, and pretty much anything you can think of. When Biden was president, it felt like everyone was complaining, and now Trump's president, it still feels like everyone is complaining. And it's the same thing with the UK. A lot of people just do not seem very happy with what's going on in our country. Whereas in a lot of Asian countries, people just are not complaining as much. Things seem so much more stable. You know, if something unfavorable happens in Thailand, it's not like people just start rioting on the street all the time. And like, if the same thing happened in London or Paris, people would be rioting. People here just kind of get on with it and don't worry so much about the small stuff and don't complain as much. much. It's like the hardships they've gone through have toughened them up and made them less sensitive. Whereas because life is pretty comfortable and has been pretty comfortable for a while for most people in Western countries, not all, I understand, but for most people, it has just made people a lot more soft and sensitive. And I think this is partially because they have all of their essentials sorted out for them. If you lose your job in the UK, it's relatively easy to claim benefits and have the government support you. And this has resulted in a lot of people putting their energy into other things, like complaining about things that they can't even control. And as I said, it's definitely not everyone in Western countries. It's just, there's definitely a lot more of these types of people than there are in Asia, that's for sure. So it does feel like society in Asia is a lot more stable and grateful for what they have. And I guess this is also because it's a lot easier to be grateful when your country has gone from being some brutal country which doesn't really look nice to being a beautiful, clean, safe place in a matter of a couple of decades. Whereas in most Western countries, the majority of people have had these privileges for their whole lives, and in some cases even the generation before them. So this has resulted in a lot of people being less grateful for what they have. These are a couple of the major reasons why I think that a lot of people think that the West is falling or has fallen. But despite this, the US still remains the richest country in the world by quite a large amount. 7 of the top 10 countries with the highest GDP per capita, or the average amount of money that a person produces in a country, are found in the West. 9 of the top 10 countries with the highest quality of life are found in Europe. 7 of the top 10 safest countries are also found in Europe. And 8 of the most statistically developed countries are also found in Europe. So statistically, the West is still the best place to live, and it's far from fallen or falling. However, it's not developing as fast as most Asian countries. So, if the West is a statistically better place to live, why do I and so many other expats choose to live in Asia, and why do we speak so well of it? The reason is because some of the most important factors of life cannot be easily represented by statistics. For example, people treat me better here. My money goes a lot further due to the lower cost of living here. I prefer the weather. I prefer the city of Bangkok to any city in Europe, and trust me, I've been to many. I much prefer the culture here, and despite the statistically safest countries all being located in Europe, I still feel really safe here. Just because it's not in the top 10, it doesn't make it unsafe. And I actually feel a lot safer in Thailand than I did back in the UK. So, where would I recommend living after living extensively in both Asia and Europe? For me, the answer is clear. Definitely Asia. So if I had to quickly summarize my answer to the questions, is the West falling or has the West fallen? I would say the West has not fallen, but Asia is quickly catching up. Personally, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the power dynamics change over the next couple of decades. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider leaving a like, and I will see you in my next video.